Okay then, well, we had a really interesting discussion because what was good about our discussion, we have some educators, people that's in education, as well as some employers on, and particularly we have the University Technical College, somebody from University Technical College talking about that as well. So a lot of our discussions actually revolved around school and young people and education. But one of the first things that we all identified was this perception of what a career in digital means. Mike actually says he had to do some research, he had to Google what digital actually meant, because you've got digital industries, but you've also got industries where digital skills are absolutely critical. And we talked about engineering and manufacturing. So I think what that highlighted first and foremost is what exactly is digital and what does it mean in terms of learning for young people and what does it mean in terms of manifestation of jobs. So our first thing was that we need more information about what those jobs are and what those skills are before we actually even start talking to schools about what sort of learning needs to take place. We then talked about perceptions of work and particularly again when we're talking about jobs and careers in digital, it may well be that there are a lot of smaller companies than larger companies, and the issue that we have about engaging larger companies and smaller companies in the process of education, but also in the process of apprenticeship. And again, it's in our area in particular, we've got a lot of the bigger companies, and with parents, they think that having a job in a large company is a lot more preferable because it's safer than having a job in a smaller company. So we recognise the fact that we need to do some work around smaller companies and what they have to offer for young people as well. We then talked a lot about schools and colleges and what's this barrier about getting businesses and schools working together. And we've got an excellent example of the University Technical College that has been going now for 12 months, but the 12 months preceding that, employers were actually engaged in the design of that school and in the design of the curriculum, and a lot of their learning is around project-based learning. We had this discussion around project-based learning against things like baccalaureate and English, maths, and science and all sorts of that more traditional. And in the UTC it works really, really well. They get that good combination of it. Whereas when you're talking with other schools who probably have got a very traditional way of working and have a set of outcomes that's not designed around careers, advice, information and going out into industry, it's a lot harder to engage those schools working with businesses because Ofsted doesn't measure those particular things. So we had this discussion around that. The other thing that we talked a lot about was teachers' knowledge around keeping up to date with knowledge of what's going on in industry and the relevance of learning to work and their own knowledge around particular technologies, because when they did their learning and teaching, it's probably even 3 or 4 years in digital is completely out of date. So we had a big discussion around how do we actually get teachers more time to actually work in industry and understand how to bring the children along to have those skills and understand what those skills are needed for the world of work. We also talked a lot about parental influence as well, because again, we've had lots of discussions around particularly engineering and manufacturing and enlightening kids, getting them really excited about it in our area, and then they go back to the parents and say, actually, that's a dying skill. We were all made redundant. So this knowledge around parental knowledge around what sort of jobs are out there and what sort of skills you need is absolutely essential. So it's like a three-way thing. When you're looking at a young person in the middle, you've got to have a way that you work with the school, you've got to have a work with the parent, but equally, at the foremost of that, you've got to have employers that's more engaged in designing the curriculum. We also talked about how you actually engage businesses in school, especially when they're small businesses. You've got to find different ways to actually make that happen. And equally so, whether or not it's a work experience or whether or not it's a company going in to talk to a group of students, making sure that the company and the employer that's going in has the skills, knowledge and relevant language to make it engaging with young people and also relevant to them. So there's work to be done with them for employers as well. We talked again about, we did touch a little bit on this thing about failing. It seems to be that people in education, or our perception is that you're not allowed to fail in education, whereas failing is actually a vital part of life and learning about life, particularly when you're talking about digital, when you're talking about engineering and manufacturing, because you have to fail at things to make them better. So it's these softer skills that we're also trying to teach children, you know, the confidence, but also particularly around competitiveness, and you know, they can fail. It's how do you cope with change and how do you cope with failure. We touched a little bit on apprenticeships and whether or not the existing apprenticeship system actually works for digital, and we thought that it perhaps doesn't. The whole system about apprenticeship and the structure of it would not work necessarily too well, particularly with a small company, and we too had the idea that you could cluster companies together so you could share the knowledge and learning with that, and also the cost. But one thing that Mike said, for his particular industry, it wouldn't make for somebody to come in straight away and work on an apprenticeship. They'd have to go to a bespoke provider to get the basic knowledge and skills to be able to come back into the industry to work with them. So the whole system about an apprenticeship we felt really needed looking at for it to work for an employer. Have I missed anything off?
No, the perception between apprenticeships and university.
That's right, yeah. Oh, this thing about perceptions, about, you know, an apprenticeship being a poor man's job. And in actual fact, it's just a different route to get to where you want to go, depending on your style of learning and depending on what's best for you. And we have to do something about changing the perception of apprenticeships with parents, with schools, to make it seen as an apprenticeship is a really, really great route. And in actual fact, if you do an apprenticeship, you can still get to degree level if you want. It's just taking a different route to market and raising the whole perceptions around the value of apprenticeships. Anything else, anybody? Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Simon.